Hello, clever people, and welcome to my review for Ghost in the Shell. So Ghost in the Shell is the remake of the 1995 anime by the same name, and basically this incarnation follows Scarlett Johansson, who is the first of her kind. She is a robotic body with a human mind. It's the first time this has ever been done, and it's about her trying to discover more of her past, discovering why she was the first one and what happened before her, and all of this certain stuff. She's basically like a policeman for a while, and then she starts uncovering things and wants to learn more about who she is. I have not seen the original anime, but I have heard astounding things about it. People say that it's a great thriller, that it's got some great themes in it, so I was actually quite excited to see Ghost in the Shell. Reviews weren't 100% positive, a lot of them were pretty weak, but I was still excited for it, and I have to say, I came out of Ghost in the Shell pretty disappointed. This is not the worst movie ever made, this is not the best movie ever made, it's in that middle area. By far, the best part of this movie is the futuristic aesthetic to it. The futuristic technology was absolutely fantastic, just the aesthetic. It looked like an anime world, and it also looked a lot like the future. They had a great blend of different colors. It all looked really, really good, and I was actually quite surprised by that. The CGI, for the most part, is incredible in this movie. You had a few weak moments, like an opening shot and a certain scene where Scarlett Johansson is running up something. But besides that, the CGI was practically flawless and blended with the sets and everything else that was going on really, really well. And another great part about this movie is the themes that it explores. It is not your typical action thriller movie. It has a few deeper themes than that. One of those is the human side to Scarlett Johansson's character, how she still wants to feel like a human despite the fact that she is in a robotic body. And a lot of the times she has a hard time feeling human. A lot of the times she just feels like a robot. And there's this great scene where she goes up to somebody and tries to feel their face, and it's just this great scene of her trying to discover, what makes up you and what's different about me from you. And they had a lot of great concepts about a human soul being stuck inside a robotic body. And they also explored the idea of human experimentation very well, how some will use a human life for resources when really it's unsure if that should happen. You saw these themes in Logan earlier this year too, and while it's not quite as good as Logan, they implement those themes in here very, very well. However, Ghost in the Shell is weak in a lot of ways. And, I mentioned earlier I liked how it was kind of more than an action thriller, but it also struggles with that. It tries to be this very deep, slow-paced, just very slow-crawling type movie that focuses a lot on the heavy themes, yet at the same time, they have some action sequences put in there. And the action was dull for the most part. There was nothing really exciting about it. And when it was put in there, it sort of took away from the rest of the tone that the movie was trying to take. This made for a weird blend that when I went out of the theater, I sort of felt empty, like I wasn't given a full movie, because part of it was trying to be a fun action movie, and the other part was trying to be a deep, thoughtful movie, and at times those two just really didn't blend. And also, though the aesthetic to it may have looked incredible, and it may have just looked visually stunning, the rest of the film around it is dull, and the rest of it is honestly just very uninteresting. Though it was this big sci-fi world, I didn't feel immersed in what was going on. I didn't feel like I was there, experiencing the same things that she was doing. The best fantasy films of all time will have it so that when you go into the theater, you feel like you're transported to another world. Lord of the Rings did this, Star Wars did this, a lot of the great sci-fi fantasy movies have done this. Ghost in the Shell is a movie that doesn't quite do it. It tries very hard with its aesthetic and with its feel and everything, but in the end of the day, it just doesn't feel like it's quite the immersive experience that it should have been. Also, I think that part of the reason that it's so unimmersive is because of the dialogue, because in this movie, the dialogue is extremely weak. They have conversations that are just very dull and boring. There's nothing really interesting going on between the two characters. They're just sort of saying their lines very robotically. I know, robotically, that sounds a bit ironic about a film that's half human, half robotic. But the acting here I also thought contributed to the unimmersive part of it. Because the acting in here, none of it feels very inspired, very big. Scarlett Johansson was fine as the Ghost in the Shell. She did an okay job, and everyone else just sort of blended in with her, but it really just didn't have much interest to it. The conversations between two people were just very standard. They were very plain. It wasn't like they were saying anything that could be quoted. The entire movie does not have one single quotable line. The entire thing is just simple, crummy dialogue. And the movie is just really undeniably forgettable. It's just not a movie I will remember. I even have a hard time remembering it now, and I just saw it last night. It's not the type of movie that you'll remember very well. It's a type of movie that you'll go into, you'll watch it, and yet you'll feel empty going out, and after that you won't really remember the movie. And another thing the movie struggles with is having a small scale, because there is no giant action scene in this movie where it's, taking place between two skyscrapers and there's people running. It's very small, and at times that works out very well because it feels like this small condensed story that isn't going to change or end the world. Yet at the same time, it has a hard time with this because at times it feels very uncinematic and it doesn't feel very, interesting. Being realistic is fine for certain movies, and Ghost in the Shell I don't think was one of those movies. This should be very much a cinematic movie that expresses some very heavy themes and has some great action, because that's what the movie is marketed as. And the issue is that it tries to be realistic at times, and that messes with its, small scale, because it's not cinematic in any way. Movies can be very realistic and still be great. Some of my favorite films of all time, The Decalogue, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, those are extremely realistic. But the thing is, those aren't big CGI epics, those are smaller scale stories. And while Ghost in the Shell was trying to be that, it was also this big ambitious film with huge, big CGI and huge futuristic technology. This goes back to it trying to be smart, yet at the same time having dumb action. It also includes this, the uncinematicness of it. It just didn't blend, and it sort of made for a mesh that I sort of felt empty afterwards. The movie felt like really, really good, expensive, fancy food that you can eat, and you can enjoy it while it's there, and you can be impressed by how it's presented to you, but afterwards you just sort of feel empty, and you feel like you aren't fulfilled, you feel like you didn't get much food, and you have to go somewhere else. That's what Ghost in the Shell is. It was kind of a letdown. I was expecting to really enjoy this movie, at least find it entertaining, and it couldn't even deliver on that, and that is why I will give Ghost in the Shell a 5 out of 10. Alright, that concludes my review for Ghost in the Shell. What are your thoughts on this film and the original anime? Comment in the comment section below and let me know. I am Robert Burke, and this has been The Clever Critics. Goodbye.